Hello, and welcome to Module 3, wherein we will study the basics of writing automated UI tests. In Lesson 3.1, I'm going to elaborate upon the document object model. I'll also cover something called web scraping, which is the process of using element locators like XPath and CSS selectors. The DOM is a programming interface for web documents. It represents the page so that programs can change the document structure, style, and content. The DOM represents the document as nodes and objects. This way, programming languages can interact with the page. A web page is a document. This document can be displayed either in the browser window or as the HTML source, but it's the same document in both cases. The DOM represents that same document so it can be manipulated. In the DOM, everything is a node. The document itself, the HTML tags, the texts inside elements, and even the attributes of the elements themselves. Let's focus on some common HTML tags like div, input, and button, and how they appear in the DOM. Div tags are often used to segment large parts of a page into smaller, manageable sections. It is a block-level element, meaning it starts on a new line and takes up the full width available. Span is an inline element, which means it does not start on a new line and is typically used to group small chunks of HTML or to style pieces of text within other texts without causing a line break. Input is crucial for forms, collecting user inputs. Buttons is used for submitting forms and triggering events. Let's look at the DuckDuckGo landing page using developer tools. The search bar is represented by an input tag. That input tag is nestled inside a div tag. And you can have divs within divs. Later, I'll demonstrate how you can string together an XPath using nested divs. You'll also notice the elements contain attributes. The class attribute is used to assign one or more class names to an HTML element, which can then be targeted in CSS for styling or in JavaScript for various functionalities. The ID attribute assigns a unique identifier to an HTML element. Unlike class names, each ID value must be unique within the HTML document. Element locators allow us to find and interact with elements within the DOM. The most common locators are ID, class, XPath, and CSS selectors. The ID is an identifier for the element that is typically assigned by the front-end developer. This is usually the best locator, as there is only one of that thing on the page. The CSS class locator finds the first element with a specific CSS class attribute. This is useful for locating items that have a unique style on the page. XPath is a language for traversing the structure of the DOM. Any element on the page that can be located via one or more XPaths and most other locators can be expressed as an XPath. CSS selectors are similar to XPath. They are flexible and powerful. Unlike XPath, they are not based on the structure of the DOM and don't navigate the DOM in the same way. These are just a few examples of what an XPath looks like. XPath can locate elements by ID or class or name attributes. It can find elements by looking for the text inside them, and it can find the nth element on a page. XPath has always been one of the favorite locators among automation engineers, especially for locating dynamic elements on a web page. Contains is one of the methods used in creating an XPath expression. We can use it even if any part of an attribute changes dynamically. It can identify any attribute by using its partial value. The method takes two parameters, the attribute of the tag, which it needs to locate the web element, and the partial value of the attribute, which the attribute should contain. The text function uses the text of the web element for locating the element on the web page. This function is useful if your element contains text like labels, which always contain static text. The AND operator is used to combine two different conditions or attributes to identify any element from a web page using XPath. The OR operator is used to locate an element based on any of the conditions separated by the OR operator. All the web elements in the XML DOM are related to each other via a hierarchical structure, and XPath provides specific attributes called the XPath axis, which exploit the relationship between various nodes to locate those nodes in the DOM. The child axis in XPath is used to find all the child nodes of the current node, and is helpful in locating elements if we can locate the parent element of the required node. The descendant axis is used to access all the children and subchildren of the current node. The fundamental difference between descendant and child is that the descendant axis identifies only the children and the subchildren of the same node. The following axis locates the element after the current node. It marks the current node as the base and finds the required element present in the DOM after the current node. The following sibling axis is similar to the following axis as it only recognizes the nodes on the same level of the current node, but if there are multiple siblings with the same node, then the XPath will identify all those various elements. For more complex structures, you might need to traverse the DOM using parent, child, or sibling relationships, which XPath handles adeptly. CSS selectors define patterns used to select the elements you want to style. In testing, we use these to locate elements for interaction. Simple selectors include class selectors like .className, ID selectors like #IDName, and type selectors based on the tag itself. Combinators can be used to navigate through nested elements. Let's open Developer Tools in our browser and search for valid CSS selectors on the DuckDuckGo landing page. As you can see, I'm using class attributes to define my CSS selectors. Notice that the name of the class attribute is preceded by a dot when I search for it using the inspector. Let's define a CSS selector that points to the arrow button at the bottom of the page. I use the name of a class attribute as a starting point and then use another class attribute name to create a selector leading to the element I want. Writing good CSS selectors requires practice, just like writing effective XPaths. Links in the description below for additional reading. Let's look at this web-based game of tic-tac-toe. We can define a CSS selector that points to a square on the board, but as you can see, the same selector points to every square. In this situation, XPath will be more effective. We can write separate XPath expressions to identify each square. This is harder to do using CSS selectors. We start with a div tag and its class name. Then we expand the expression to include a button tag with its class name. We then place the whole expression in parentheses and add square brackets to identify the number of the element we want. In conclusion, CSS selectors are generally faster than XPath and are often recommended for use in web testing where performance is a concern. However, there are situations where XPaths are more suitable for navigation. That concludes this lesson on the document object model and element selectors. I hope you find the information useful. Next, we're going to write our first test case together, so stay tuned.